Alright, now that we've loosened up these bolts, we've jacked up the car. These are the type of materials you'll need. You'll need some brake cleaner, some grease, 17mm socket wrench, torque wrench or torque bar, a vice grip or vice, any kind of C-clamp, and I use an impact just to speed up the process, as well as your brakes, your spare or your replacement brake pads, and a 19mm socket wrench, and some steel wool just to clean up your brake parts, and a bungee cord just to hold the caliper in place. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how we take this wheel off and service or replace the brake pads. Loosen these bolts off. Put them somewhere safe. Take off your tire. Put this somewhere safe. I usually like to put it underneath the car, just in case if your jack fails, the tire is still supporting the weight of the car and your car won't crash and destroy itself. So with the tire off, the brake pads are right here. It's pretty dirty. And your caliper here. There's 2 bolts. You'll only need to loosen one or one of the 2 alignment pin bolts if you're servicing the brake pads only. But if you're servicing the rotor as well, which I might next time I change my brake pads, loosen up one of the alignment pins so your caliper can swing open. I'll show you that by doing that now. It is a 17mm. I usually like to loosen this pin, and once this pin is loosened, you can take it out and then your caliper should be able to swing open. So this bolt right here. Get yourself a mallet. It's loosening. These are tightened to about 80 foot-pounds. I'm going to use my impact to take it off the remaining. Good. And just pull it out. You'll see there's a bit of grease on this. And put it somewhere safe. Let's go ahead and get a little mallet and just lightly tap this out. So I hammered this out as well as loosened it off a bit. Then you can just hammer this back piece with a mallet or something so you can, it swings up. So essentially how your brakes work are with these brake pads, there's a piston here. As you apply your brakes, this piston will push out as well as apply pressure onto this side of this brake pad. So with your bungee cord, hook it up. I usually like to tie it off somewhere secure so I know it won't fall. So once that's tied off, you can see I tied it off. Just to hold this in place, I'm going to push this piston back in with the vice grips. Cardboard there. You can use a C-clamp or any metal kind of vice that you have. I just have a vice grip at home. So now you can see this is flush. This is just dirt brake pad. It's flush with the actual piston. This is the cylinder or piston itself. And it's closed. These are your brakes. You have 2, one on either side. The wear indicator goes on the top and behind the wheel. So you want to take these out. Take out the brake pads. These are pretty well evenly worn. You want to inspect your brake pads just to see if there's any kind of funny business going on with your brake pads or your car itself. Either you're not aligning it properly when your mechanic's installing it, or there's dirt in there that you need to clean, or your rotor is wearing out unevenly. So there's a couple of things. My box comes with a little description, so you can find something like this online. I'll leave a picture at the end of the video so you can kind of look at what your brake pads are doing or what it tells you. So go ahead and take off the right and left. These might be stuck on there, but if they are, just gently pull them out. We'll pry them out. So while the brake pads are off, these are quite a bit of brake left on them compared to my passenger side. You want to inspect your rotor. These ones probably should be replaced. You can see there's a bit of rust here, but again, it's a 94 Accord. You can buy your rotors online for about 15 bucks. If I was going to replace these, I'll probably add slaughter brakes just for fun. But these are still quite good. This is just a little bit of a edge here, you can see. But again, it's an old car, so it's not really a performance car or anything like that. So, I mean, you want to be economical. That's why we bought the car in the first place. So go ahead, take off your brake hardware with a screwdriver. Gently do it if you're going to reuse it. If you're not, you can do however method you want. I'm taking these off. I'm going to do it gently. I don't want these to break because I'm going to reuse them. If your brake replacement kit comes with them, it's always best just to go with the newer set, but it's not necessary. Same as your alignment pins. It's recommended, but not necessary. Go ahead and clean this off. Alright, once you're finished cleaning your brake hardware, you mainly want to just clean out the inside of here. This is where your brake pads basically slide in and out of. So you want this to be clean and free of any of that carbon buildup. You want to clean your hardware mainly on this contact points and the inside and outside of this little trough here. This is where your brake pads would glide in and out. And if you have any buildup of carbon here, you would make your brake pads stick, and that's not good. It will cause premature wear of your brake pads. Usually people like to replace them, but if you're good at cleaning them out, you can always just reuse them. A good note is just to inspect them if they're cracked, rusted, and obviously just doesn't look symmetrical. Say there's a pitting or whatever rusting on one side or another, just replace them. They're cheap. Usually you can just buy them with your brake pads. So we're gonna go ahead and clean off our brake hardware surface, and I'll show you how to do that. Just use some steel wool and some brake cleaner. We don't need to clean it too well, just spray a little bit. We just don't want any loose grit or brake dust blocking us from mounting our hardware properly. So this gives us all a nice clean little brush out. Just another hose this off with brake cleaner. I use these mechanic rags. They're a little stronger than paper towel. Just give it a nice little wipe, just in case any of that steel wool broke off. Wipe the inside as well. Just a once over, gentle. Next, we reinstall the brake hardware. Make sure you align it properly. You don't want it, again, looking like this. You don't want it touching the rotor. You kind of want it to be spaced evenly. Try to space them evenly and put them in there. You can test it. Hear any grinding sounds? That grinding sound is coming from my rotor here, caliper up above. But as long as it doesn't make a squeak, you're good. Okay, next we install the top hardware, like so. Just make sure it's not touching the rotor again. Good spacing. Next, we grab our brake pads. This part is important. We're gonna start greasing our contact points. So first, just put a little dollop on your brake hardware surface. Try not to get it on your rotor. This just helps it slide better, your brake pads. Put it on this little ridge up here, this little nub right here. Just to be sure my brake pads are well lubricated, I also just grab them on the side so you don't put any grease or anything on the brake pads themselves. Just grease the contact points. I like to put a little bit of grease on the back. Just grease up the back a bit. Grease up the contact points. If you do get grease on the brake pad's surface, you can always clean it with brake pad cleaner. You can see it slides nice and easily in there. That's what we want. Next, we're going to put a bit of grease on the piston up here, all the way around the circle. Just on the outside here. Bit of grease in there. Lastly is the wear indicator, goes on the top portion, and just some grease here. Put grease there, as well as the bottom contact point, float, and always to be sure, just the back. Got a bit of grease on the brake pads. Spray some on a rag and just wipe it off. It's greased up and put it in. And the caliper goes back down. Make sure your boot, there's a little rubber boot right here. You can see this gap right now. The rubber boot has to go back on properly. So just push it down. This is just a grease boot. Make sure it's proper. Clean off your alignment pin. If your brakes came with replacement ones, use them. If not, just clean them off. Spray a bit of brake cleaner on it. Make sure there's no grit or anything on your thread here. If you do have any anti-seize, you can put some anti-seize on this and torque it down to 80 pounds. I just have some white lithium grease I'm going to use. Be generous with it. And we're going to put it back in. You can see the little rubber boot. Put this back in. Push this in. We're going to tighten it first. Again, this is just a 17 millimeter. So now we're going to torque it to 80 foot-pounds. Okay, there you go, that's 80. With the wheel, I like to clean off the wheel contact surface, the bolts a bit to remove any grime, as well as I like to clean off the contact inside here, as well as this contact here, and the bolts. Get all your bolts, give it a good little wipe down, get rid of any grit there might be in there. Don't want anything loose. Keep your thread life lasting longer. If there's no grit, just spray them down with a bit of brake cleaner.
Trying to forget you, I'm all alone in a ghost town. There's a beautiful madness inside my soul, and I can't stop thinking of you, walking on the lonely avenue. Are you, are you, are you? My love so wild, please give me a sign. My love so wild, please give me, baby. My love so wild, please give me.
Once we lowered the car back down onto the floor, go ahead and torque it back to 80 foot-pounds or 110 Newton meters with a 19 millimeter socket wrench. The reason why you do not want to torque one bolt all the way down at once is if you torque one side, you might cause a like a bulge within one of these bolts here, or within the actual wheel. That's why it's just good practice never to tighten it all the way down at once. So all those are back at 80. Put it on your hub. And there you have it. Quick DIY in under 30 minutes. Thanks for watching.